we're essentially doing with this digital revolution that we're going through is we're taking parts of our existing economy and we're automating them and we're turning them into digital value. And that's exactly what companies would be doing with blockchain backed carbon credits, is basically taking these existing value structures. Sometimes they're not always very well defined, especially in economies like Canada, where our carbon offset programs are voluntary. There are a lot of gray areas around codifying exactly what data points go into those types of certifications. So I think that blockchain is also going to help standardize that. And I think that Canada is the right place to do it because of our high degree of environmental regulations and our really strong environmental policies. That if any country is going to take the lead in building global standards for a tokenized carbon credit or an offset, like a renewable energy credit, any of these existing, kind of amorphous types of value coming from these ESG processes, we should be doing it here. And that's exactly what I'm doing, along with a number of different partners, including Guild One Inc., a blockchain company based here in Calgary, who's pioneered a lot of these, measurement and data capture solutions on blockchain for exactly these types of processes. We are establishing a group together with some large industry partners who I can't name quite yet, but we'll be able to in the next couple of weeks, the Blockchain ESG Council. So this is a cross-sector collaboration, basically a consortium, which is engaging in projects to do exactly that, to find ways to collaborate on standardization for things like carbon credits on blockchain, to have pilots that explore the role of these technologies within existing systems and their convergence with IoT and other measurement devices. So that's really exciting. And like I said, I think Canada is the right place to pioneer this. There are a couple of projects which are going to be announced outside of Canada very shortly, but it's really based in Canadian values and Canadian standards. And I just personally love that because I don't think we get enough respect around the world for the incredible work that we do in making our energy industry sustainable.
I definitely take pride in that. So there's a lot of myths around, what is green, what is environmentally friendly. A lot of myths around the oil and gas sector being dirty, or fossil fuels in general being harmful to the environment. Maybe they are to a certain extent, but maybe they are also being exaggerated in the way they are being projected in the mainstream media, let's call it. How do you see us being able to bypass all this narrative around the oil and gas sector being, or in generally Bitcoin mining being harmful to the environment? There are many ideas that are being proposed by people and many solutions, but regardless of all that, how do you see us bypassing that narrative?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, the one thing I would say there is like narrative is really the key word. This is a lot of, what I've done throughout my career. And I think that, industries like energy, really, and it was difficult, but they weren't able to take control of that narrative, especially here in Canada. And as you were talking, I was reflecting on a conversation I had when I was down in Miami a couple of weeks ago for the Bitcoin 2021 conference. I interviewed Dr. Saifedean Ammous, who's the leading Bitcoin economist, author of the Bitcoin Standard, and just a great thinker. And I asked him a similar question. I mean, what do you say to the environmental critics of Bitcoin and proof of work mining? And he told me, that his view was, all human progress, absolutely everything that we've done that's bettered human society has involved replacing human labor for energy. This is just sort of a baseline measure of the progress of civilization. It's essential. And right now, we might be in an energy transition, but it is a transition. And we need to support the industries that are enabling us to make that transition. And this is my perspective. And the oil and gas industry is one of those. I mean, if Canada's oil and gas industry disappeared, it would just shift to, more Middle Eastern production or more South American production. I think that Canada really has an obligation to lead this transition by showing the world the best practices of our industry and the high standards of our industry. And through technologies like the ones that Guild One has developed, we can actually export our standards to the rest of the world technologically. Rather than this being a regulatory shift on the part of, say, a developing nation that doesn't have our high standards for things like emissions, it can actually be more of a technological evolution where through adopting technologies like blockchain, these standards automatically become encoded in their production. So I think that, Canada needs to do a lot more to put this narrative forward and also offer the solutions in terms of the amazing technology companies that we have that can enable industries all over the world to become more sustainable. In the case of Bitcoin mining, the problem is a problem of measurement, in my opinion, because you hear, some really varied statistics on the amount of Bitcoin that's mined on renewables. There's not a lot of industry consensus on it. I do think that it's high. I mean, it's certainly much higher than, average energy usage from renewables, which is, I think, 20 something percent. And Bitcoin is certainly at least 50%. But I also think that, especially as Bitcoin has gained a lot more interest from institutional investors, it's going to have, the standards that are being imposed on all kinds of other industries imposed on it. And I think that's what we're seeing right now. Airlines, I know so many different banks, tons and tons of companies, manufacturing companies all over the world are adopting net zero goals. And making commitments to become more sustainable. And I think as Bitcoin becomes more and more entrenched in our economy and our financial systems, it's going to be subject to those same kinds of pressures, to work towards much greater sustainability. I think that, when Elon Musk comes out and says that, as soon as it's provable that 50% of Bitcoin is mined on renewables, that he'd consider accepting it again as a payment for Teslas. I think that just shows the need to quantify this. And I think as renewables become a lot more economical for mining, it just makes sense for them to play a bigger role. There was that really interesting white paper that Jack Dorsey put out with Square and ARK Invest, which looked at a model for Bitcoin as an enabler of renewable energy projects. And he had some really interesting ideas in that white paper around how it could be used to, prevent congestion in energy systems that, don't have good storage, like solar. How it could be used to make projects more viable before they connect to a grid and can start monetizing their energy. So while that infrastructure is being constructed, Bitcoin mining can help finance the early stages of these projects. So I think all those ideas are really interesting. I think that as soon as the industry manages to prove out some of these sustainability metrics, it's going to become a lot more appealing to mainstream investors. And then, you look at, people like Kevin O'Leary, who has come out and basically said that if Bitcoin becomes much more renewable than it is now, and if this can be proven, that this is what's going to take Bitcoin ultimately to 100 grand to 500 grand. Because right now, largely because of the environmental concerns, Bitcoin is only held by 1% of institutional investors. So according to O'Leary, the ESG question, being able to quantify it, being able to certify it, creating wrapped products that have, attached tokens that show the environmental status of Bitcoins, just like we're talking about doing with barrels of oil, are in his opinion, and in the opinion of a lot of other investors, the thing that's really going to bring it into the mainstream and create a lot more institutional and government interest.
this just about says it all, and sheds light on where the energy industry is going and how this new energy era is actually taking place, and that shift in the way wealth is being generated, the way banking is being conducted. We live in a world right now where literally you don't need to rely on a bank or an institution to store your wealth, transact, or do business. And it's just a matter of time till that network adoption really continues to grow and really take, the effect that it needs to take on to society, where society, I think, will take form into a whole new socioeconomic construct. The shift in the entire way the world is being run is already taking place in front of us. And I think Bitcoin itself is really a bridge between our traditional way of transacting and the new way of transacting. Not to say that government currencies or fiat currencies are going away anytime soon, but eventually I think Bitcoin will continue to be the most reliable bridge between the centralized and decentralized world.
Well, it's certainly something that is pushing governments to address some of the absolutely, shocking and horrifying global issues that we have. I mean, such as the 2 billion people around the world who, are deprived of access to even basic financial service. I mean, that is a massive tragedy on a global scale. It, prevents people from climbing out of the trap of poverty. It affects far more women than men. The majority of the unbanked around the world are women. And at the recent Canadian Blockchain Association for Women event that we had a breakout room where we had, kind of this really open discussion on the role of cryptocurrency in the digital economy and empowering women and empowering them. And there was a woman from Sudan who told us about how in her country she wasn't able to get a bank account without the signature of a male family member. But able to open up a cryptocurrency account with no problems. This force for empowerment, whether it's Bitcoin, whether it's something else, this is pushing the world to address these issues which have just been hidden because the people who suffer because of them are powerless. And it's giving people the opportunity to actually join in the global economy, to connect to the rest of the world, and to be able to improve the lives and those of their communities. And that's just one of the reasons why I think this is one of the most amazing innovations of the 21st century, and it's going to continue to transform the world.
Amen to that. Well, there you have it, Alexis Pappas.
Thank you so much, Mohamed. It was an incredible pleasure, and
Definitely.
Continuing discussions.
Thanks for drilling into crypto with us. If you enjoyed our discussion, please give us a like on your podcast app or social media, and don't forget to subscribe. Join us next time when we will deliver more perspectives on crypto asset mining, energy markets, and the global financial revolution.